Hello ladies and gentlemen, Gamesday here. This is a quick guide for heroic Megera in Throne of Thunder. And as usual, if you're looking for the full guide, just click the annotation on screen. Let's do this. For your raid composition, you'll want 2 tanks and 2 to 3 healers. I would strongly recommend 3 healers, as this fight has some of the highest sustained damage to the raid of any encounter in this entire zone. And you frequently have to deal with that. So 3 heals is going to be probably the best method, especially if you're learning this encounter. So the biggest change on heroic is the addition of a new head type called the Arcane head. This will appear at the start of the fight in the back in the Concealing fog, and its general ability is to spawn these little Wyrm adds that will appear throughout most of the phases of the encounter. And dealing with nether worms is a big part of learning the heroic fight. So there are a number of ways you can deal with the worms. The way that we're using in this video is to actually have one of our tanks, our monk tank in this case, not tank one of the heads, but instead to just be full-time dealing with the worms. So as soon as they spawn, he grabs them and does his best to DPS and interrupt them so that they don't cast as much. If you allow them to cast, they'll do a spike and bolt on random players for very heavy damage, as well as less frequently cast a stun. That's a channeled ability that can be dispelled from magic dispel. So whether you have a designated player to handle them or you just have your DPS switch to them, you want to deal with these worms right away as quickly as you can. Now the spawn timings of the worms does depend a bit on which head you are killing and at which time you're doing it. So for example, you'll just get 1 set per spawn period against the first 2 heads. Then you won't get any against the 3rd head, because the 3rd head is actually the purple one that's coming from the back. So you don't get any adds the first time you fight the first arcane purple head. But then the second round, you'll have 2 purples in the fog, so you'll get twice as many adds during that period. So generally speaking, the second round of this fight, going through the heads, is going to be more difficult than the first, just due to the adds, so keep that in mind. So on heroic, the abilities that are used while in the Concealing fog from the heads are increased in difficulty, much more damaging and deadly. So I'll just briefly talk about each of those and how you deal with them. So the first one is for the venomous head, the green one. And while this is in the fog, it will cast acid rain, which are the globules that target random ranged or raid members and do an AE. However, on heroic, instead of casting 1 globule, it will cast 3 simultaneously. For this very reason, it is very, very uncommon for raids to kill the venom head throughout the fight, because dealing with 3 of those bombs at the same time, especially if you're unlucky with positioning, is a good way to be one-shot pretty quickly. So, just as you see in the video here, we never kill the green head so that we never get any of the globule bombs throughout the fight. The second change is the frozen head. When it casts Icy Ground, which targets a ranged member and chases them with the beam, the area of effect that this hits is about twice the size over time. So it will expand over the minute duration that it's active. Basically what this just means is that the amount of space you have originally is smaller, but the ground itself will increase in size. So you want to make maximum use of the space you have to kite those beams away. The best way to do this generally is to have quadrants of the room, sections that your ranged players stand at max range in, and when they're targeted, they run straight back, hugging the side of an existing patch of the ground. And this will maximize the space that you... The best technique we came up with to deal with the icy ground is basically to have our ranged members on the rough side of the room that we're attacking the current head at. So for example, right here on the purple head, our ranged players are kind of on the left side where the purple head is, and they run the beams along that left side. When we're on the the rightmost head, so not the green one since we never kill it, but the red one, then all the beams go along the right side of the room. And then finally the blue head in the middle, the beams go kind of in the center. So if your ranged are split roughly in those quadrants when attacking those heads, they'll be within range to DPS and heal, but also able to keep the beams kind of in a general area away from the rest of them. And finally, the extra change for the red head on cinders is that in addition to cinders applying a dot and being dispellable like normal, every 3 seconds that it's active on a player before it's dispelled, it will drop a flame patch, just as if it was dispelled. So essentially what this means is that holding the cinders does not really help you a whole lot on heroic. Whereas on normal you can hold it and run through an ice patch if you want to clear it out. But on heroic you're going to just simply run through and replace that ice patch with fire patches. Now the fire patches are smaller in radius than the ice, so if you really need the space you can do that. But generally speaking, we found it was just better to dispel as soon as possible. So for cinders on ranged players, we dispel immediately. And for cinders on melee, we dispel as soon as they move out of the melee stack position, just a few yards out. So there are a few different strategies, but I'm only going to talk about the one you see in the video here, because that's the footage we have. Again, if you want full details of other strategy options, then check out the full guide for a lot more information on that. So basically what we do is on the first set of heads, as you see here, we tank them like normal. So our paladin tanks on the blue and our monk tanks on the green, and that's pretty standard. However, once the blue head dies, from this point forward in the rest of the fight, our paladin tank is the only tank to have threat on both heads throughout the rest of the phase, or the fight. What this means is that he'll be in melee range of whichever head our DPS are killing, so it'll be red on this upcoming phase here. While the green head is aggro on him, he built up threat on it during the rampage, but no one else, including the tank, is within melee range of the green. This will cause the green head to shoot a bolt at random players pretty frequently that does heavy damage, but otherwise it just uses its breath attack on the tank when that cooldown comes up like it normally would. So you're basically trading a lot less melee damage for a bit more random raid damage. But by doing this method, as long as you have the healing to keep your tank alive, you can again designate one tank like we're doing here to handle the worms entirely, and this will help a great deal. So the only caution is that you have to be very careful with your positioning, especially for melee DPS. If they're too close to the head that you're attacking, or too close to the tank rather, the breath from the green head that goes across the room will hit the melee players. So you can see we have pretty specific spots marked on the ground there, and you can just copy these, but the basic idea is that the marker matches up with the color that the head is that we'll be attacking at that time. So here we're attacking purple, and melee are stacked on the purple marker. This allows our melee to be safe and in no danger of getting breath from the green head at the time. So if you're trying to copy this method, just copy the marker locations and then make sure your tank knows to tank, far away on the opposite side. So one final thing to talk about is dealing with the late stage worm adds that you'll get in the second round of heads, which we're just starting here. As I mentioned in the previous section, the number of worm spawns you'll get will be double that of the first round, and therefore the amount of spike damage on the raid, especially during Rampage, can be quite high. So worms can be CC'd in most fashion, so strong CC will work on them in a pinch, but the best thing is usually stuns. So stuns or silences, try to rotate those, and then DPS the worms down quickly if they're being problematic. The other thing to plan on is when you will use your major DPS cooldowns. So for the most part, we plan to use our Bloodlust to burn down the fifth head that we're attacking, which is essentially the red head the second time we're in Rampage, or second time we're against it. So that'd be right here, basically. So this is because we have a lot of worm adds. The red head is the most dangerous combination for the tank because of the breath attack. and therefore we want to end this particular phase as quickly as possible. When we face the next head, the purple head, you're down to one set of adds because there's only one purple head in the fog at the time, since one of them's up front. And then the final head, which is the third time you face the blue head, you'll get double adds, but by then it doesn't really matter because you're just focusing the boss completely, or the head, and trying to finish the fight there. The final thing to talk a bit about is Rampage, and this is an insanely high amount of damage on the raid, especially in combination with random bolts from the Wyrms. So it's really important that you have a good raid cooldown rotation going for this. The way we did it was essentially split up our cooldowns into 3 categories so that they would almost be certain to be up every third Rampage phase. And therefore the cooldowns and the players assigned to them would just be assigned to one of the 3 raid markers. So, for example, when we're stacked up for the third Rampage against purple that we just did, people that do the purple cooldowns would use their cooldowns. And then people would be assigned to the Rampage for blue and the Rampage for red as well, all separate. So if you can come up with a 3-step rotation, that'll probably be your best bet for handling Rampage. And with that really concludes the quick guide to Heroic Megera. To be quite honest, there's a lot of minutia and detail that just can't be covered in this, so you can get a lot more information from the full guide if you need more details, but it's pretty much a matter of getting used to the adds, the new head type, dealing with the changes to the concealed fog abilities, and then just managing the insane amount of damage that's happening. So, as usual, good luck, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed, please subscribe.